Hello everyone, my name is Sarah Nickenig, and today I will be giving you all an overview of the key points within my capstone writing project. The title of my paper is Place: The Influence of Community and Social Issues in the Artworks of Edward Manet, Kathy Kollwitz, and Kara Walker. To begin, I will be discussing place. What is place? According to Chinese geographer Yi Fu Ti Wan, it is a coverall term for the various modes through which a person knows his world. Place is both a psychological and physical state of being in the world of art. It is the environment in which a human grows and shapes who they are. Community, people, and events play an important role in place. They help us understand who we are as individuals. They shape our thoughts, emotions, beliefs, and decision-making. It is through this influence of place that the artists Edward Manet, Kathy Kollwitz, and Kara Walker create a new form of communication by highlighting social issues and exposing the truth of the inadequate realities they function in, changing the viewer's interpretation of art from prejudice to unbiased. The first artist I discuss is French modernist painter Edward Manet, who was no stranger to rebellion. It is through his rebellious nature that he brought attention to the untraditional people of society, by questioning the traditional values of both society and the world of art. In the preface of his solo expedition catalog, Manet writes in the third person. He states, quote, "The artist today does not say, 'Come and see works without fault,' but 'Come and see sincere works.' It is sincerity which gives them a character which makes them seem like a protest, although the painter has thought only of rendering his own impression. Manet has never wanted to protest. On the contrary, the protest has been against him, and he did not expect this. They arose because there is a traditional way of teaching forms, methods, and aspects of painting, and because those who have been brought up to believe in those principles will admit no others. Apart from their formulae, nothing is worth anything, and they become not only critics, but active opponents." End quote. Manet believed that, for sincerity to be present within a work of art, one must create an art piece containing authentic techniques and subject matter representative of error and real-life topics. Significant changes began to be made in the years of industrialization in Paris in the mid-1850s. Wealthy families benefited greatly from these changes, but the lower classes were left behind during the transition. Men and women began to live on the streets, becoming beggars, prostitutes, and rag pickers. These are the everyday individuals and real-life experience of his community that Manet set out to expose in his painting titled The Rag Picker. In this painting, Manet depicts a man on the margins of society in the streets of Paris, an elder man with an untamed and overgrown gray beard, a mustache, and long hair just slightly past his ears, covered by a black bowler hat. The man wears modern clothes, which appear to be ragged and filthy. He is wearing an oversized and loose-fitting gray long-sleeve shirt, which may at one point have been white, but due to living on the streets has become dirty. His baggy pants are blue, with a large hole in his left knee, draped over his worn-down gray shoes. The figure is holding a stick in his hand, used to collect trash on the floor, while a sizable gray bag is thrown over his right shoulder, with his right hand gripping at the end. The older gentleman is shown in a hunched position, looking towards his right with his eyes peeking under his hat. His facial expression is that of a man who appears to be tired. Placed on the floor next to the figure is a small pile of trash, resembling a traditional still life in art. This can be seen as a direct insult to the salon and their ideals of tradition. Manet's use of lighting helps not only to shine a light on the figure depicted, but also emphasize the artist's attention to the subject matter that he has chosen. As stated prior, the individuals of our community greatly influence our decision-making. The same can be said for the artists in the art world. Spanish painter Diego Velázquez had a significant influence on Manet's artistic style in The Rag Picker. In comparing Manet's The Rag Picker to Velázquez's oil painting Menipus, We see a similar figure of an old rag picker containing similar features to Manet's. We also see a similarity in the still life placed on the floor near the figure. Manet has taken elements of Velasquez's painting and placed them into modern times. While Edward Manet exposed the reality of the forgotten people of his community, German expressionist artist Kathy Kollwitz transported her audience into the harsh realities of the private life of motherhood in the 20th century. Artists throughout history have often used the religious figures of the Madonna and Child as a symbol of the bond between a mother and child. In modern history, the depiction of this motherly bond differs. Artists began to depict this relationship in ways that were real to the events happening in the world around them, by removing the ideal notions of motherhood from the artwork. Kollwitz used the emotional experience of motherhood not by displaying the ideal experiences, but rather by creating artworks that show the viewers the new reality of motherhood and the psychological influences of the events of place. In Kollwitz's artwork titled Woman with Dead Child from 1903, she portrays a harrowing image of a mother gripping desperately to her deceased child in a scene of pure emotional anguish. The composition places the mother and child as the main focal point, taking up a more significant portion of the space than the plain lit background, which emphasizes the dark, chaotic energy of the figures. The mother is in a cradled position, seated with her legs crossed and leaning forward, while her son lays limp and lifeless in her arms. She has buried her chin in her son's chest, with a look of pure pain expressed on her face. The expression on the child's face seems as though he is in a peaceful sleep, with his head facing upwards with a single beam of light shining on him, while also lighting up the mother's face. At the same time, the rest of their body is surrounded by the dark shadow of grief, causing the viewer's eyes to address the two figures immediately. Both figures are etched in the nude, symbolizing the natural connection between a mother and child, turning the viewer's focus to the narrative shown, allowing them to feel the emotional intensity and experience of losing a child. Chinese philosopher Yi-Fu Tiwan states that place is a center of meaning constructed by experience. Kathy Kollwitz married her husband Karl Kollwitz in 1891. After their marriage, they moved to Berlin, Germany, where her husband had a private practice. Kollwitz would draw inspiration from the mothers and children that would visit for doctor's appointments. Kollwitz's interest in death came in her later works. She began to express a dark psychological side of motherhood that the modern women were experiencing due to the social issues of war, poverty, and death. Kollwitz used herself and her son Peter, who was 7 years old at the time, as the models for the figures in the artwork Woman with Dead Child. Unfortunately, Peter sadly passed away in 1914 while fighting for his country in World War I. Therefore, many scholars believe that this work of art predicted Peter Kollwitz's death. Living in Germany during a time of social and economic challenges of the 20th century, Kollwitz was a first-hand witness to the pain and suffering she and other women and children experienced. According to the article titled Kathy Kollwitz, Witness to War, Gender, Authority, and Reception by Ingrid Sharp, Kollwitz had a certain amount of guilt following the death of her son Peter for having convinced and encouraged him to volunteer for the war at a young age. She states, quote, "Like many other women, she was committed to the concept of sacrifice for a higher ideal, a concept to which she returns again and again in her diary. Kollwitz felt that was complicit in Peter's self-sacrifice." End quote. The events that took place around her influenced her to take a stand on the issues that society was facing in her artwork. American contemporary artist Kara Walker brings her audience back in time to the antebellum South, during slavery, where most of America considered African Americans as objects and inferior to the whites, thus creating a psychological wound among the black community, which is still present today. Walker's use of place draws attention to the modern racial and gender stereotypes in America. By transporting the audience back in time, the artist exposes the physical and psychological damages of the past and the impact it had on not only the artist herself, but the communities and places in which she has lived, worked, and existed within. Kara Walker was born in Stockton, California, and moved to Georgia at the age of 13. Like many other African Americans growing up in quote-unquote white America, Walker had to face certain stereotypes that had been around for centuries, which she has since used as the main topic of discussion in her work as an artist. She used this first-hand knowledge of growing up in the South and experiencing the black and white divide in her artwork. As a result, she began working with silhouettes as her choice of an artistic medium, because, quote, all figures are black, implying that racial identification is only possible through clothing, posture, hairstyle, and facial contours. That is to say, the history of historical imagery. End quote. Through this, Walker can create a world of people that are only recognizable through historical stereotypes. This way of storytelling confronts the viewers with the truth of the scene, not allowing them to be distracted by details, but instead be present in the reality of Black America's past. According to Walker, quote, it is very important to look back. I don't think we look back enough. I think sometimes looking back leads to depression and stasis, which isn't good, but looking forward without any kind of deep historical feeling of connectedness, it's not good either. End quote. In Walker's 2014 exhibition titled A Subtlety, she created multiple installation pieces. The central piece was a prominent white Sphinx figure containing the stereotypical racial features of African American women. She depicted features such as large breasts and bottom, full lips, and a wide nose, wearing a hair wrap similar to the hair pieces the mammies would wear during the time of slavery through the Jim Crow era. She titled her sculpture Sugar Baby. The name of the sculpture was chosen due to the materials used to create it: sugar, molasses, plastic, and polystyrene. The sculpture was displayed with 15 other sculptures, which depicted the figures of young boys, also made out of candy and molasses. The exhibition took place in the historic Domino Sugar Refinery in Williamsburg, New York, during a time of transition for the sugar refinery. The building had just been sold and had redevelopment plans. Walker researched the relationship between the slave trade and the sugar trade for this installation, researching every detail to connect her work to the place and events of the past. Not only do the installation sculptures themselves make an apparent reference to the time of slavery, but Walker's decision to place the artwork in an industrial building is a reflection of the history of both New York and America as a whole. She is not only drawing focus to the past issues, but also indicating the present time issues. Each year, more and more historic buildings, predominantly in black and brown communities, are gentrified, erasing the truth of that part of history. Novelist Toni Morrison states, quote, we live in a land where the past is always erased, and America is the innocent future in which immigrants can come and start over, where the slate is clean. The past is absent or it's romanticized. This culture doesn't encourage dwelling on, let alone coming to terms with the truth about the past. End quote. Walker's art is not created explicitly for the black community. Instead, it is created for black and white communities to open their eyes to the violence and traumatic scars left on American soil. Walker drew inspiration from past artistic styles to create works of art that were representative of the past and the present. American regionalism was an art style that began in 1930s and the 1940s. American artists began to move towards a realistic style of art that told stories of ideal picturesque America and move away from the traditions of European art. It is this idealism that Walker challenges in her artwork. Her work is meant to evoke the pain, fear, and trauma endured by the slaves. Although Walker did not experience slavery firsthand, she has experienced the repercussions of the situation. She knows of these events through storytelling passed from generations. Maria Hersher describes it as post-memory, which is essentially the memory of trauma passed down from generation to generation, having different meanings for each one. Her depiction of place is through the retelling of a dark part of history. She does not aim to solve the race issue in America. Instead, she has created works that represent the historical trauma of the stories from the people and places she has lived. Each of these artists demonstrates the influence of the psychological and physical aspects of place within their artwork. by focusing on the social issues they and their community have experienced. Edward Manet challenges the perspective of his audience by forcing them to see the unideal everyday people of society who have been forgotten and looked down upon by the upper and middle classes of the 19th century. Kathy Kollwitz brings her audience into the harsh realities of motherhood by drawing influence from the mothers of her community and their stories, showing the gruesome truth of the unpleasant nature of death that some mothers are unfortunate to experience during the 20th century. Kara Walker takes her audience back in time to the antebellum South to emphasize the large scars that the past has put on the Black community in America. Each artist shows the harsh realities and influences of the communities and events that have taken place around them, opening the eyes of their audience to the critical issues at hand and changing the way we create and interpret art.